Well, I'm going to read this from Steve Zeltzer. Through Steve Zeltzer, I came to know and join with Workers' Memorial Day and organize with more injured workers. And so I'm going to read a statement from Steve on Workers' Memorial Day opening statement, year 2007. The memorial today on April 28, 2007, at the state capitol for injured workers and workers who have been killed on the job is to remember these workers, but also to defend the living. Unfortunately, as many of the workers and their families here today, things are going in the wrong direction. More and more workers are afraid to complain about health and safety problems despite having the legal right to complain. There are less and less health and safety inspections, and Cal OSHA is being decapitated. The last doctor employed by Cal OSHA, Larry Rose, retired this past year and has not been replaced. Why is that with millions and millions of workers in California, we cannot have one doctor in Cal OSHA? Why is it that there are more fish and game inspectors than health and safety inspectors to protect workers? Why is it that some within the labor movement are supporting plans that allow companies like IBM and others to hide their health and safety records and incidences of cancer and other diseases? Something is seriously wrong, and we are here today not only to highlight these problems, but to demand solutions. Many workers are afraid to file worker compensation claims for fear they will be permanently forced off the job and prevented from working in their fields. Again, unfortunately, they are right. Many workers are bullied on the job and are afraid to complain for fear of having their careers being destroyed. We need legislation to protect workers from being bullied on the job. The passage of SB 899, which was pushed by the governor and voted on almost unanimously by the legislature, has been very good to the insurance companies whose profits have skyrocketed to billions. While rates have gone down somewhat, injured workers are now put in a cauldron of obstacles to get medical care. Review boards and the pro-company ACOM rules are being used to stall and prevent rapid treatment and care for injured workers. Some workers can no longer get doctors to care for them as a direct result of these pernicious regulations and rules. We support the William Morris initiative called the Fair Medical Treatment for Workers Act initiative. This initiative will allow injured workers to go to their own doctors instead of being forced to go to company doctors who are pressured to limit health care to the detriment of our health. Permanent disability payments have also been cut by 50%. Injured workers and their families are bearing the horrible costs of this deregulated environment. At the same time, the insurance companies and their agents and lawyers have tormented workers not only by providing care quickly, but in targeting workers with compliant district attorneys who take their marching orders from the employers and insurance companies. Some workers, like Anita Blick, this lady here in the blue, and have been framed and jailed by these district attorneys. The result of all these tactics have led to a massive cost-shifting scam where insurance lawyers, company doctors, and even worker compensation judges are urging workers to go on federal SSI, Medicare, disability insurance, and public hospitals. We are calling for congressional hearings at this cost-shifting scam and also for sanctions against the state of California for the complete failure to regulate self-insured employers like Kaiser, Seventh-day hospital chains, and other self-insured employers. We demand that action be taken by the California Insurance Commissioner Steve Poizner and California Attorney General Jerry Brown and their staffs to prosecute these insurance companies for fraud and terrorism against injured workers. I just want to say about terrorism, it's not so much an act as it is a frame of mind. So I heard that on TV last night. I thought, yes, terrorism is a frame of mind. So I just wanted to add that. Steve uses that word terrorism, and it's a correct term. We support the elimination of the insurance industry and healthcare and for a single-payer system where all people get medical coverage regardless of where you are injured or whether you are employed or not. We thank you for coming today, and we know that this will not be the last rally and speak out we have for justice and human rights. We have just begun to fight, and we will be heard. And Steve, we wish you were here, okay? And we're thinking about you. Thank you.
I worked for Safeway, and I started in 1972. And I was injured twice. I was injured in 1974, again in 1986. 1986 was a back injury that I could no longer work, and continue the lifestyle that I was used to. I went to school for many years and increased my educational skills, but I got to a point where I could no longer sit in a classroom and take my lectures and notes and be fair to the rest of the class. And so I can no longer go after my degree, my second degree. At this time, in 2003, it was recommended that I have surgery on my back. The same year that it was suggested that I have surgery on my right knee. Since then, Safeway has hired lawyers, numerous lawyers, and I feel numerous medical prostitutes to write incorrect information. All they are medical prostitutes, and all they do is write erroneous information against the injured workers that seems to justify them from holding back our benefits. In 2005, they took my doctor away. I no longer have a physician. And in 2006, they no longer pay for my medications. So I cannot go out and buy my own physician, being that I'm under workman's comp, because I would lose my workman's comp case. And I am paying for my own medications on a very low income, and my friends are helping me with that. I shouldn't have come to this point. It shouldn't come to this. We shouldn't be treated like this. And I think that the majority of the population is not recognizing what's happening to the injured workers, how we're suffering, because it doesn't happen to them. If it doesn't happen to them, then it's not real. So I just would like us to expose this governor for who he is, and he's working for the large insurance corporations and lining their pockets while the injured workers are not getting the needs that they need, that is met for them. And at that hearing, I was told by Safeway's attorney and my attorney that I need to settle. I have lifetime medical on both injuries, and I refused to settle. And their reason was that I can go on Medicare. And I said, well, why should the taxpayer pay for my injuries? And they said, well, if you don't take it, you're going to lose this case. And I said, well, I'll take the risk in losing this case. But I refuse to have the taxpayer pay for my surgeries. That's not what we agreed on when I signed the contract. That's not what I got when I got $14,000 settlement and a lifetime medical for my back. I'm not asking for thousands and thousands of dollars. I'm just asking, please give me my doctor back. Please pay for my medications and pay for my insurance and justify what you're doing to these workers. You know, grant them what you've agreed on.
My name is Anita Blick, and I believe I have the workers' compensation story from hell. I worked hard my whole life. I started out as an emergency medical technician and dispatcher for a Bay Area ambulance company. I then worked for 11.5 years for the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, where I started as a trainee and worked my way up to supervisor. And then went to work at the same police department where my husband worked at the town of Atherton, one of the richest communities in the country. In 1993, while working the graveyard shift, happily that nobody else liked to work, I was changing the large reel-to-reel 24-hour tapes that used to be standard for all incoming police and radio and telephone calls when I slipped on a wax floor and landed on my right knee. This began an odyssey of grief that is truly, you're right, surreal. To make a long story that has lasted 14 years relatively short, I ended up with 2 knee surgeries. The city's group, who was the insurer, self-insurer for the town of Atherton, sent me to a man named Dr. Conrad, an orthopedic specialist. The first surgery he did was called a lateral release on my knee. Interestingly enough, that surgery is no longer performed because it not only failed on me, but it failed on just about everybody that I ever did it on. They found after the fact that surgery was no more successful than doing nothing. So a year later, in February of '95, I had a second surgery, which was called a Roux-Goldthwait Trilliant procedure. I later found out at a criminal trial that surgery had been successful for roughly 12 years prior to my having it. The surgery should have consisted of taking a piece of bone off the tibia, the side of the tibia, pulling the ligament that had been damaged across to the front, and a screw put through the bone piece that was removed, the ligament, and into the tibia to hold it. When it healed, the screw should have been removed, and that should have fixed my problem. However, this physician, Dr. Stephen Conrad, who did this procedure, decided to do a modified procedure. And instead of attaching the ligament that was damaged to the bone, he split it in half, ran one part of it over the top of my kneecap and the other part underneath it, and attached it to fascia, which is soft tissue, and it never held. For years I asked him why this knee was not stable. I couldn't understand why I had done everything they had told me to and more, and I was still not better. My knee still dislocated. I still fell to the ground relatively frequently. I was getting hurt in other places because of all these numerous falls, and I simply could not understand it. In April 1st of 1996, I took my fourth fall at work after being returned back to work. And Dr. Conrad told me there was simply nothing else that they could do for me. At that point, I requested Canadian crutches, not because I couldn't walk, but for stability, to use them sort of as outriggers so that I wouldn't fall. When my knee gave way, I would have these crutches to catch myself. Ultimately, I was determined to be 77% disabled because I used Canadian crutches. Once again, I told them from the beginning, not because I can't walk, but I need them for stability. And also in that time, I decided I'd had enough of their system. Dr. Conrad, by his own admission, earned 60% of his income from workers' compensation. Does that tell you something? They sent me to other doctors, all of whom worked for the insurance company, who said, "She's a faker. She's a liar. She's an exaggerator. She doesn't have all these problems." I had been a lifetime swimmer, and I used that as my tool to get back on my feet. In the beginning, I couldn't even get out of the pool by myself. My husband had to help me in and out of the pool. I couldn't turn around at the end because I couldn't tuck my feet up and push off. I couldn't even kick my good leg because it disturbed my injured leg enough to cause me pain. So I decided, well, if I can't fix my knee, I will make my upper body so strong that with these Canadian crutches, I will be able to get about almost as well as I could on my 2 feet. And that's what I did. I swam in circles for the longest time, for years. Eventually, surprisingly, I got much stronger. I was eventually able to swim a mile in under an hour, almost as fast as I had been able to swim prior to being hurt. But this knee is injured permanently. By the time 2000 came along, I had improved myself through buying my own crutches, my own canes, my own assistive devices. I think I've tried every knee brace on the market. Finally found one that's made in Germany that works for me. None of the others worked. Most of them are snake oil treatments. They simply don't work. Not just for me, but for most people. They just don't work. My stepmother has a master's degree in physical education. She designed an exercise program specifically for me. 2 years on the couch between surgeries and after surgeries had left me at roughly 240 pounds. I was almost helpless. I swam my way back to health because you're weightless, and it was something that I could do. By the time 2000 came along, by the time 1999 came along, I thought I could go back to work. I knew I would still need help at that point, but I told the workers' compensation judge that I could go back to work. There's verifiable paperwork on file that I made an effort to go back to work. In 2000, I thought I was so well. My son, who had been a paramedic, found a seat assist device that helps you get up and down from a chair. My job as a dispatcher required a lot of getting up and down. This device was enormously helpful, but that alone wouldn't have made me better. The fact that I had been swimming for years and exercised made me strong enough to capitalize on this device that I then found. And between those two things, a lot of hard work and this seat assist device, I decided I could go to work pretty much full-time, full work. They claim I never told anybody I was getting better, and I actually went to jail because they claim that I never told anybody I was getting better. And you know, if a man in a three-piece suit with a lawyer's degree says something often enough in writing, you'd be surprised at how many people will believe it. It doesn't make it true, but it becomes believable. It becomes almost the truth. I contacted the town of Atherton's communications supervisor. She testified under oath at a deposition, at workers' compensation court, and at the criminal trial that I had contacted her and told her I could go back to work. She got approval from the acting chief of police that said I could go back to work. I then went to the physician that I had been seeing and gave him a Xerox copy of the information regarding the seat assist and said, I can go back to work. He says, you can't go back to work at the place where you were hurt. This will never work. I said, fine, I'll go away and keep working and we'll see what happens. In September of 2000, I actually started driving. I hadn't driven since the April 1st fall in 1996 until September of 2000. 4 years, I live in a very remote area. When you can't drive there, you're stuck at home permanently. I have also been a lifetime gardener over my entire life. My husband completely redesigned my home, my bathroom, my garden, my steps, everything, so that they work for me. Everything is at my working height. I started driving, which appears to have been my criminal sin of omission. I never got workers' compensation for not driving. I got 77% disability workers' compensation for being on Canadian crutches. During this time frame, my physician canceled 2 appointments. I don't know who else I was supposed to tell. I had already told the town of Atherton. I'd already told my physician. I even sent a Xerox copy to the insurance company. They have it in their own internal emails that I said I could go back to work with the use of this device. However, the town of Atherton, the city's group insurance company, and the lawyers that represent them, and the district attorney of San Mateo County still claim that I never told anybody that I was getting better. In March of 2007, they took pictures of me working in my garden with a shovel, planting roses in barrels that are wine barrels that are raised high so that I could deal with them. My husband had prepared the pots with potting soil. I use a shovel with my arms instead of my feet because obviously when you have a bad knee, which leg are you going to stand on? I literally don't have a good leg to stand on. If you shovel with one leg, you got to stand on the other. So I use a shovel with my arms. I believe that video actually shows that I'm disabled. Nobody in their right mind would use a shovel that way. It shows me lifting up my 4-year-old granddaughter with dead weight. I bend at the waist. I'm an incredibly strong woman. I know I don't look like it, but I am. I've been an athlete my entire life. I have a huge amount of upper body strength that I have used to compensate for my bad knee. So they took these pictures of me in March of 2001 and sent them to the district attorney, who then filed charges against me for fraud. They started out with 10 charges of fraud. By the time I finally went to court, they had whittled it down to 3 charges of fraud. They accused me of grand theft, of insurance fraud, and an archaic penal code called 550B3, which says that anyone who fails to tell someone something of importance that results in them receiving benefits is guilty of either a misdemeanor or a felony. And that was the one count that I was, in fact, convicted of. The judge could have made that either a misdemeanor or a felony. I have never even had a traffic ticket. I worked for the police department for many, many, many years. My son is a police officer. I believe in law and order, or did. I no longer do, by the way. The judge chose to make this a felony, and he sentenced me to 90 days in jail. Because I had worked for a police department and my son was a current police officer in the county, I was sent to 60 days solitary confinement in the women's facility. It is interesting to note that in San Mateo County, there is a work furlough program for men who are nonviolent offenders, but there is no such program for women. They even have a separate facility for such men. They're allowed to work during the day, keep their jobs, and check in at the work furlough facility at night. But there is no commensurate program for women. Instead, they say, we give you a third off time for good behavior, just as we would a man who's working, and that's the same. That locking you up in solitary confinement is the same as letting you go out to work every day and keeping your job. Somehow, they seem to think that that's fair and equitable. Obviously, I think most of us would disagree with that women have the equal rights under the law to equal treatment in all realms, including incarceration. As being in solitary confinement and under suicide watch, I was only given to wear what was called a Ferguson gown. It is a quilted gown with Velcro closures. I was not allowed underwear. I was not allowed socks. I was in jail during the winter when it hailed outside on a regular basis. I was allowed out of my cell for half an hour to 45 minutes, most days, but not all days, to take a shower and brush my teeth. I wasn't allowed a bar of soap. I wasn't allowed a toothbrush. When I became ill and vomited and had diarrhea, I wasn't even allowed a washcloth to clean myself with. The only thing I was allowed to have was a single roll of toilet paper and 3 books. That was it. And I had to spend 60 days in that condition. I survived through the grace of my friends who kept me in reading material. I read roughly 160 books in 60 days. Pretty much 24 hours a day. They would let me have 3 books at a time. They often would rip off the covers. I didn't care. Just give me a book, I can escape. They can lock up your body, but they cannot lock up your mind. To digress for a minute, one of the reasons that I lost the court case was that during this time, my husband unexpectedly passed away of cancer. He was my main witness. He was the person who had taken care of me during all this time. From the time he was diagnosed to the time he died was only 4 days. He was not well enough to give a deposition, and there was no time. Within 24 hours, he could not speak. The last 3 days of his life, he could not even move. So I lost my main witness, and one of the last things he said to me was that, oh my God, I won't be there to testify for you, and you can't win this case without me. And as it turned out, that was in fact the truth. It is now a year later since I have been out of jail. I would like to say that there was some conclusion to this after 14 years of this amount of grief, but there's not. On Monday morning, I go to workers' compensation court. The town of Atherton, the city's group insurance fund, and the district attorney of San Mateo County are asking for in excess of $300,000 in restitution for all of the legal fees that they have racked up, for all of the private investigators. They even want me to pay for the 2 surgeries that were failed, even though they still admit that I am at least 17% disabled. I don't know how you can commit workers' compensation fraud when they still even admit that you are still disabled. I still don't know exactly what it is I was convicted of. The statute of 550b3 does not require them to even tell me that. Simply that I failed to disclose something to someone during the time period charged, and that I failed to do that. To this day, I am not entirely sure exactly what that is. The jury, after the fact, said they thought that I should have told somebody that I had started to drive. As I said, on the day that they took the videos of me gardening, I told the doctor that I was walking without crutches on a continuous basis. Using those crutches was the basis for my workers' compensation claim and the 77%. I told him I was not using those crutches anymore, that I could go back to work. Seems pretty clear to me that I had fulfilled my obligations. To this day, I really don't know what it was I did wrong. And if I had to do it all over again, I would make the same mistake. Workers' compensation is so complex that it is one of the 4 legal specialties. Even other lawyers don't understand workers' compensation. I have no idea how a layperson is supposed to understand this system. I am not a stupid woman, and I have endeavored to the best of my ability to understand my responsibilities. And to this day, I don't know what the heck it was I did wrong. I have lost my husband. I had to refinance the home I have lived in for 25 years and which had been paid for years. I retrained myself. The reason they went after me was that because they had never paid me at the correct rate, and because they never hired someone to look at the ergonomic conditions of where I worked, because they never offered me rehabilitation that was my right as a worker, because they never did any of the things that they were supposed to do, and the monetary issue went all the way to the State Supreme Court of California, which they lost. They have never paid a penny of those awards. Never. To this day, they have not paid a penny of that. And they know that they are liable for somewhere in the area of $250,000 worth of penalties and fines for what they have done to me. The only way to get out of paying this, the only way, is to convict me of fraud. And they have been successful in that with the help of the District Attorney, Catherine Alberti, in San Mateo County. And whoever said that these people were prostitutes is absolutely correct. She even had the nerve to come to the Capitol here and say that San Mateo County had overrun their budget because I had almost all police officers for witnesses at my trial. They now want more money so they can do this to other people. It's unconscionable. The lie persists. They still say I never told anyone I was getting better and that I lied. I never lied to anybody about anything. I am as honest as the day is long. I am pretty much what I look like, a little old grandmother who works in her garden and knits and crochets and reads a bazillion books. How somebody like me can end up incarcerated in a system that's at 200% of maximum, in a facility that is full of mold and literally falling down around their ears, is unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. True criminals walk away free, and somebody like me goes to jail for 60 days in solitary confinement. If you treated an animal the way that I was treated, they would put you in jail. Workers will be persecuted and prosecuted more because they have gotten away with this with me. It is now open season on injured workers. Nobody has the deep pockets to afford the legal help that is required to stay out of jail anymore. These people can fight you forever. I have been doing this for 14 years. I can tell you that it is not going to go away. If we do not stand together, we will perish alone in the dark, and no one will hear us.